The needle hovered an inch above my arm, and the alien holding it froze completely still. I did not know why. A second ago, Dr. Velen had been chatting pleasantly about blood pressure ranges, moving with the smooth, practiced calm of someone who had done 10,000 routine scans before mine. Now the needle hung in the air, trembling slightly, and the soft blue light on the medical scanner behind me had turned a deep, alarming red. "Do not move," Velen said. Their voice, usually warm and almost musical through the translator, had gone flat and sharp. I sat very still on the cold examination table, my bare feet dangling over the edge, and tried to figure out what I had done wrong. I had been on the station for 6 days, 6 days of polite handshakes, careful smiles, and answering the same questions over and over about where humanity came from and what we ate for breakfast. This was supposed to be the boring part. A checkup, paperwork with a needle. "Is something wrong?" I asked. Velen did not answer right away. Their long fingers, 4 of them on each hand, tapped against the scanner controls, and the numbers on the screen kept climbing and falling in patterns that clearly meant nothing good to them and everything ordinary to me. "Your tissue," Velen said slowly, "shows extensive scarring, cellular damage, old wounds, layered on older wounds, going back years. There are foreign protein signatures in your blood that I cannot identify, structures that look like they were built to kill something and left behind after the fact." I blinked. "Okay. That is not a normal response," Velen said. "That is not okay." 2 more medical staff drifted into the room behind a glass partition, watching the readouts with expressions I was starting to learn meant deep unease on their species. Their skin, usually a pale gray-green, had gone almost white at the ridges of their faces. One of them reached for a comm panel on the wall, and I heard the word quarantine pass between them in their own language, before the translator caught up and repeated it in English a half-second later. "Wait," I said, holding up both hands. "Nobody needs to quarantine anything. I'm not sick." "Your body," Velen said, turning back to me with wide, dark eyes, "is full of evidence of war." I almost laughed, except the look on their face stopped me. They were not joking. They were not exaggerating for effect, the way people sometimes do. They looked at me the way you might look at someone who had just calmly admitted to surviving something impossible. "Can you explain that scarring?" Velen asked. "One piece at a time? I need to understand what happened to you." And that was the moment I realized this conversation was going to take a very long time, and that somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a patient and started being a specimen. "My name is Daniel Foss. I am not a soldier. I am not a scientist. I was picked for this exchange program because I speak 3 languages, and because, according to the recruiters, I have what they called an easy temperament, which mostly means I do not panic when things get strange. That skill was about to be tested." "All right," I said, settling back onto the table. "Where do you want me to start?" "Start with the oldest scar," Velen said, pointing a thin finger at a cluster of marks glowing on the display, deep in the tissue near my collarbone. "This one. It looks partially healed, then re-injured, then healed again. 3 separate events." I looked at the spot on my own skin. There was nothing to see on the outside, just smooth, ordinary skin. "That's probably from when I was 7, I said. "I got a bad case of strep throat. Then I got it again about a year later. Then once more when I was 11. It's a bacterial infection, pretty common where I'm from." "Bacterial," Velen repeated, and typed something into a private console. "A living organism. Inside you. Multiple times." "Sure. Bacteria are everywhere. In the air, on surfaces, in food. You can't really avoid them. And your body simply allowed this organism to enter. It wasn't a choice," I said. "It just happens. You breathe, you eat, you touch things, and things get in. That's kind of the whole deal with being alive on a planet full of other living things." Velen's fingers had stopped moving on the console. They were staring at me now with an intensity that made me shift on the table. "On your homeworld," Velen said carefully, "how did your species survive this? If organisms are constantly entering your body against your will, how are any of you alive to speak of it?" I thought about how to explain something I had never really had to explain before. because everyone I had ever known already understood it the same way they understood gravity. It was just there. It was just true. We have something inside us called an immune system, I said. It's kind of like an army that lives in your body all the time, and it doesn't wait for orders. The second something gets in that isn't supposed to be there, it goes to war with it, automatically. You don't feel it happening most of the time. Sometimes you get a fever, which is your body raising its own temperature on purpose, to make it harder for the invader to survive. Sometimes you get a swelling, which means extra blood and defenders are rushing to the area. It's not pleasant, but it means the system is working. The room had gone very quiet. Even the two staff behind the glass partition had stopped moving toward the comm panel, and were now leaning closer to the window instead. An army, Velen repeated, inside your body, fighting battles, without instruction from you. Right. All the time, every single day probably, in small ways you never notice. And it wins. Usually, yeah. If it didn't, I wouldn't be sitting here. Velen set down the small instrument they had been holding, very slowly, as if afraid a sudden movement might set something off. Please, continue. The scarring pattern here, near what I believe is your lung tissue. Explain this one. That's probably pneumonia, I said. I had it when I was 19. It's an infection that gets into your lungs and makes it hard to breathe. I was in the hospital for 4 days. 4 days, Velen said, and you recovered. Obviously. On our world, Velen said, and their voice had a strange, careful quality now, like someone walking across thin ice. A single unexpected pathogen entering a habitat is treated as a catastrophic event. Entire sections can be sealed, populations evacuated. We have eliminated disease from our worlds almost completely. It took us nearly 900 years, but we did it. We do not get sick, Daniel Foss. We have not gotten sick in generations. My own grandparent's grandparent was the last member of my family line to experience what you are describing to me right now, and it required a full medical team and 3 weeks of specialized treatment to save her life. I sat with that for a second. 900 years to build a world with no disease. And here I was, describing a head cold like it was Tuesday. How do you avoid it? I asked. Getting sick, I mean. We do not avoid it, Velen said. We prevent it entirely. Every surface, in every habitat, is continuously sterilized. Every traveler is decontaminated before entry. Every food source is engineered and monitored from origin to consumption. There is no unpredictable exposure. There is no risk left to manage, because we removed the risk itself, generations ago. Our bodies were never required to develop what you are describing. We have no internal army, Daniel Foss. We never needed one. We built the war outside of ourselves instead, and we simply refused to let it in. That sounds exhausting, I said, and I meant it. Constant sterilization, constant control. What happens if something slips through anyway? Velen's face did something I had not seen from them before. A kind of flinch, small and quick, gone almost as soon as it appeared. It is very rare, they said, but when it happens, it is often fatal. We have no natural defense left. We removed the need for one so long ago that the capability faded from our biology entirely. A single unfamiliar organism, left unchecked, can spread through one of our bodies with almost nothing standing in its way. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as the shape of what they were describing became clear. 900 years of a perfectly sterile world had not made them safer than us. It had made them fragile in a way that had nothing to do with strength or courage. They had built walls so tall and thick around themselves that they never had to learn how to fight what came over them. And now, if anything ever did get over the wall, there was nothing behind it to stop it. Let me ask you something, I said. Have you ever heard of a vaccine? Velen tilted their head. The translator hummed for a second, searching for a match, and came up empty. I do not know this word. Okay. So sometimes, on purpose, we take a very small, weakened, or dead piece of a dangerous organism, and we put it into a healthy person's body on purpose. Not enough to actually make them sick, just enough for the immune system to notice it, learn what it looks like, and build defenses against it. So if the real, dangerous version ever shows up later, the body already knows exactly how to fight it and can win almost instantly. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. That silence had been fear. This silence felt like something closer to disbelief. You infect yourselves, Velen said slowly, on purpose, with disease, as a form of preparation. A very small, controlled version of it. Yeah, we've been doing it for a couple hundred years now. It's how we got rid of diseases that used to kill millions of people. We didn't wait for the war to come to us. We went out and picked small fights on our own terms, so we'd be ready for the big ones. Velen did not respond for a long moment. When they finally spoke, their voice had lost the clinical edge it had carried since the beginning of the exam. Your species did not eliminate disease, they said quietly. You made peace with it. You built a truce with it inside your own bodies, and you passed that truce down, generation to generation, without most of you even understanding what you carry. I guess that's one way to put it, I said. We didn't really have the option to wall ourselves off from everything. Our planet's full of things trying to eat us, from the very small to the very large. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, all of it. If we'd waited for a world with no threats in it, we'd never have made it out of the trees. How many separate infections? Velen asked, and there was something almost hesitant in the question now. Would you estimate you have survived, in your lifetime? Not including the smallest unnoticed events, just the ones significant enough to leave a mark, like the scars I am seeing now. I actually had to think about that one. I don't know. Dozens, probably. Strep throat a few times. Pneumonia once. Chickenpox as a kid. A stomach bug that put me in bed for 3 days when I was in college. A cut that got infected after I fell off a bike. Honestly, I've lost count. Most people have. It's just part of living. Part of living, Velen repeated, almost to themselves. And that's just me, I added. Every single person on my planet has some version of that list. Billions of us, walking around right now, each one carrying their own private history of battles they don't even remember fighting. Our bodies keep score, even when we don't. Velen turned to look at the 2 staff members behind the glass. I could not understand what passed between them in that silent, wide-eyed glance, but I did not need the translator to know it was not a look of comfort. Dr. Velen, I said, are you all right? I am attempting to recalibrate my understanding of your species, Velen said. You arrived here presenting as gentle, curious, eager to cooperate. Your representatives spoke of peace and shared knowledge. We assessed your technology as far behind our own and concluded there was little risk in allowing close contact. That's still true, I said. We are here for peace. Nobody sent me to threaten anybody. I understand that your intentions are peaceful, Velen said. That is not what concerns me now. What concerns me is what your bodies are capable of without any intention at all. You did not build weapons to survive your world, Daniel Foss. You are the weapon. Every one of you, built by your own biology, refined by hundreds of thousands of years of exposure to threats we cannot begin to imagine, carrying inside you a system that identifies, adapts to, and destroys hostile organisms automatically, without command, without hesitation, and apparently, without much difficulty. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again, because I honestly was not sure how to argue with that. We are not fragile, Velen continued, almost to themselves now, working through the thought out loud. We believed we were the advanced ones. We removed disease from our lives entirely. We considered that mastery. But mastery through absence is not the same as mastery through survival. You did not remove the war. You became the battlefield, and you won so many times, so consistently, that you stopped noticing the fighting at all. I mean, when you put it that way, I said, it does sound kind of intense. It is more than intense, Velen said. It is the single most alarming medical finding in the history of my career, and you are describing it to me as though it is a minor inconvenience from your childhood. To be fair, I said, it kind of was. Velen set down the scanner entirely and stepped back from the table, putting a small but noticeable distance between us, for the first time since the exam had begun. I need to ask you something else, they said. And I need you to answer honestly, because the answer will determine how this station proceeds with future contact protocols. Go ahead. If one of us were exposed to something inside your body, something your immune system considers hostile, even if it is harmless to you, what would happen? I thought about that carefully, because it was a fair question, and not one I had ever really had to consider before either. Honestly, I don't know, I said. We carry things that don't bother us at all, but could really hurt someone whose body has never dealt with anything like it. That's actually a real problem, even between different groups of humans sometimes. There are stories from our history about explorers who traveled to new places and accidentally brought sicknesses with them that were mild to them, but devastating to people who had never been exposed before. So yeah, if your people have never built up any kind of defense at all, even something ordinary to us could be genuinely dangerous to you. Velen's expression, for the first time since I had met them, showed something that looked distinctly like fear. Then this exchange program, Velen said slowly, this open, close contact between our peoples, was based on an incomplete assessment. We saw your simpler technology and assumed a simpler species. We did not consider that 4 billion years of evolutionary conflict on your world might have produced something far more resilient than anything our sterile, careful civilization ever needed to become. I don't think anyone was trying to hide anything, I said gently. I think we just didn't know it was worth mentioning. It's like breathing to us. Nobody thinks to explain breathing. That, Velen said, is exactly what worries me. The most dangerous things about your species are the ones you consider too ordinary to mention. They turned toward the console and began typing rapidly, pulling up new fields, cross-referencing data, calling up records I could not read. The two staff behind the glass had stepped away from the window entirely now, moving toward what looked like a separate communication station, speaking quickly to each other in low, urgent tones. What's happening? I asked. I am filing an amended medical classification, Velen said, without looking up, and recommending a full review of contact protocols to the Council, not to end the exchange program. I believe, if anything, this makes continued contact more valuable, not less. But it must proceed with a full understanding of what your species actually is. And what's that? I asked, in your professional opinion. Velen finally looked up from the console and met my eyes, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything at all. You are not a fragile species that got lucky, they said finally. You are a species that turned every threat your world ever produced into a permanent part of yourselves. Your bodies do not fear disease, they collect it, they study it. They keep records of it in scars and antibodies you cannot even see, and they carry the memory of every battle forward, generation after generation, whether you choose to remember it or not. You did not need 900 years and a sterile empire to survive. You needed exposure, adaptation, and time, and your species has never once flinched from paying that price. I sat there on the edge of the table, feeling strangely exposed under that description, even though nothing about my body had changed in the last hour, except how it was being looked at. So, I said, trying to lighten the mood a little, because the room had gotten heavier than I knew how to sit with. Does this mean I'm cleared for the rest of my checkup, or do I need to come back another day? Velen actually let out something that might have been a small, disbelieving laugh, quickly swallowed back down into something more composed. You are cleared, they said, fully healthy, by your own standards. I would like to keep detailed records of this conversation, with your permission, for further study. And I believe I will be recommending significant changes to how we screen and prepare our medical staff for any future contact with humans. That's fair, I said, hopping down off the table. For what it's worth, we don't usually go around thinking of ourselves as walking battlefields. Most days I'm just trying to get through breakfast without spilling coffee on myself. I understand, Velen said, and there was something almost gentle in it now, the fear from earlier folding into something closer to respect. But please understand something from my side as well. Where I come from, we built an empire on the idea that if we simply avoided every danger long enough, danger would eventually stop existing for us. You have shown me, in the space of one examination, that danger never truly disappears. It only waits. And your species did not wait for a way around that truth. You built yourselves out of it instead. I did not have a clever response to that, so I just nodded, and let the silence sit there between us for a moment, comfortable now instead of frightening. Can I get something to eat? I asked. All this talk of infections has made me hungry, which feels a little backwards, but here we are. Velen studied me for a second longer, that same careful, recalibrating look in their eyes, and then gestured toward the door. Yes, they said. Go. Eat. Rest. And Daniel Foss, if you would not mind, please do not mention any of this to your crewmates just yet. I would like the council to hear it directly from a full medical report, rather than second-hand, from someone describing it the way you just described it to me, as though it were nothing at all. No promises, I said, grinning as I headed for the door, but I'll try. Behind me, as the door slid shut, I caught the last few words Velen spoke into the recording console, quiet, precise, and clearly meant for the official record, rather than for me. Species classification updated, threat assessment revised. Recommend immediate caution in all future medical contact. Subjects do not require protection from disease. Subjects are the disease's greatest and most successful opponent, carried unknowingly, and without fear, in every single one of their bodies. I did not hear the rest. I was already halfway down the corridor, thinking about lunch, completely unaware that somewhere behind that door, an entire civilization had just quietly decided that humanity was the single most dangerous and most reassuring thing they had ever encountered among the stars.